International education, the classrooms, the staff rooms, the lives built far from home. This is The Common Room. I'm Joshua Sussex. Let's talk.
I started back in the Chatham Islands, New Zealand, and that was, 20 years ago. And it was for a change, but I did find a position that I was very interested in, a principal's position in the Chatham Islands. And so I talked about it with my then husband, and we decided it would be a really good move for our family for a few years. So it was wonderful. It was a great move for our family. It taught me a lot about resilience and communication and, making the most of a very rural environment. And so we decided to go to Papua New Guinea. I talked about it a lot with my sons, and we were very, very excited about such a new change, and lived there for 4 years. Loved it, absolutely loved it. Had another baby while I was there, and then moved back to New Zealand for a few more years. And then I sort of wasn't ready to settle down, but getting older, obviously, and my daughter was getting older. We kind of thought, I'd remarried by this stage, and we kind of thought, well, before we're too old for new visas and things like that, and while our daughter was still portable enough, being 8 years old, we thought one last overseas adventure. So we decided to come to China for 2 years. That was 8 years ago. We're still here. My daughter has lived longer now in China than she did either in Papua New Guinea or in New Zealand, and she's fully bilingual. She's completely fluent in Mandarin. And yes, so we're still here now, still here in China, and love it. Absolutely love it.
Wow. And how did Papua New Guinea come about? I mean, the application process or the job advert, what was it that got you interested?
I had a friend many years ago who had been on a mission. He was a missionary to Papua New Guinea. And I wanted my boys to learn about a different culture. Some of the schools in Papua New Guinea, we were in Lae, which is the second biggest city in Papua New Guinea after Port Moresby. And some of the classrooms were held out underneath a big tree out in the open. And here I was complaining in my classroom that it was a little bit hot, that we only had some fans and only one air conditioning unit working. And yet there were maybe 60 or 70 children with one teacher under a tree, and no books, no pencils. So it changed my outlook a lot as well. And yes, I loved my years there, absolutely loved teaching there. It was one of the best things that could have changed me as an educator, but also for my family. It's something I reflect on a lot.
Really interesting. So a big motivation for you was actually more of a cultural education for your family to experience a different way of life to perhaps change their perspective.
Absolutely.
And did it work?
Yes, it definitely did work. My two boys are obviously now adults, and they still talk about their years in Papua New Guinea, how it made them more resilient, gave them better communication skills, and it gave them that opportunity to see other people's perspectives, a completely different lifestyle. And they loved it.
Can I ask about raising children? How do you do that as a parent in an international environment?
I've got 5 children altogether. So obviously I had 2 children, went to Chatham Islands, came back to New Zealand, another 2 children, went to Papua New Guinea, had another baby there, and now in China. But it didn't seem any different. My boys, who were 9 and 11 at the time of going to Papua New Guinea, they were young enough to look at it as a real adventure. They loved the excitement of having guards around us and living in a compound that had to have a guard opening the huge gate that had razor wire and broken glass on the tops. They loved, ridiculous things like the lockdowns or the riots, those sorts of things. They found all of that very, very exciting, whereas I was kind of concerned about what have I brought my children to at the very start. But we were able to really embrace it and learn that while we were here, we were living a different life. But my baby, that was all she knew. She was carried in a bilum, a bag around Auntie Jenny's head for, till she was maybe 14 or 15 months old. And I look back on it now and laugh because a friend of mine here has a little one and feeding the baby out of those pouches and things like that. Whereas when my daughter was being weaned, I would do what the national women would do, and I would take a bite of the food and I'd chew it up and then I'd drop it into her mouth, and she would just open her mouth like a little bird.
Mm.
And I think that now, and I'm like, that's disgusting, you know. But that was how the mothers made sure that it was nice and soft for the baby to eat. So that was exactly what I did as well. And when I tell her about this now, she's like, Mummy, yuck, you would drop your, and I'd be like, it just was. It just was how it was.
Fascinating. I mean, the sort of cultural differences you name there, I can only sort of imagine. Could you imagine yourself, if you think back to when you were younger, before you had any children, ever imagining sort of chewing food in Papua New Guinea and feeding your daughter?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. But because that was what we did, that was what all the mums did. And even carrying Tani in the bilum, I still have her bilum that she was carried in. And obviously I've got 8 grandchildren now.
So, what's it been like with that move from Papua New Guinea? Obviously, you went back to New Zealand for a period of time, and then you've then made the move to China. What was that move like, and how did you feel, and how did your daughter feel, and during that process? And is it just one school you've been at, or a few schools? And what have those changes been like if you have been at different schools?
Yes, I have been at a couple of different schools. It was a big change, mainly because obviously I'd remarried and we were going as a family, not just myself as a single parent, in my Papua New Guinea years. So it was a big change for her. She was very, very excited. She loved the idea of moving to an apartment and having a lift, an elevator to be in the apartment. But we were very naive, I think, because Papua New Guinea seemed a lot more like New Zealand in some ways, whereas China is so very, very, very different. So initially, my daughter was extremely excited, and it was a big adventure for us all. It was obviously pre-COVID that we came, and we'd said we were coming for the 2 years. My husband had to step back from his very well-paid, highly respected management position to be a trailing spouse to basically run the household. And obviously I was the sole breadwinner, which was also different for me. And we'd talked a lot about what this would look like before we came. But the reality was so very different. And I think it did take a lot of communication and a lot of building resilience, but it was probably the most trying and challenging time of our whole journey, that first year of being here, because, of course, then COVID happened. We were very frightened what that might mean for us if, God forbid, my daughter got sick or something like that. We were hearing all these terrible horror stories. We couldn't get back to New Zealand if anything had happened. I missed my oldest son's wedding because we couldn't get back. My granddaughter was born with a serious heart condition which she needed surgery for. I wasn't able to get back to New Zealand, and I was forbidden from leaving China. And it was when they had the MIQ lottery system to get back into New Zealand, and I wasn't able to get a place to go into quarantine. And so we couldn't get back. So all of those were challenges that when we initially said, oh, let's go to China for 2 years, this will be fun, good for our family. The reality was very, very different. My husband, he had a huge identity change, like I said, going from a very respected job that he oversaw 200 people to basically only being responsible for making sure the washing was on and the meals were done, those sorts of things. So he felt he had lost a lot of his identity. And it was really, really hard. I definitely won't sugarcoat that part. But we still have those times of, loneliness and his role here in society. It's not looked on as a valuable role, So it was a huge shift for him. And I'm so very, very grateful that he did agree to come along on this new adventure, which has been amazing for our family as a whole, but it has come at definitely, some costs. So when you're thinking about an overseas move and there is only the one partner working, all of these things have to be talked about in advance and discussed. I had to show a lot of understanding, a lot of grace with all of the difficulties that have come through because of this.
How did you navigate your daughter with you in China for the first time and the natural challenges that brings? Your husband, as you just described, the change in career and day to day and his challenges that he's facing, whilst you're then holding down a job. You're in international education, a demanding, high pressured environment to be in. And that's without those pressures and challenges that you were facing. How did you navigate your way through that? And what advice would you give those that, again, may face similar situations?
I would definitely say open and communication is absolutely key, and making that plan prior, what things might look like, having a lot of understanding around what, these new challenges might be being faced as a family. My daughter had to obviously leave several schools where she had made fantastic friends. She loved her teachers, making those changes. So at the start, it was definitely my career. This is what I want to do for my career. But that definitely didn't work. We had to evolve into this is what we are doing together for our family, and being able to navigate those changes to think this is what is the best for our family at this time. So she's able to communicate with her friends now very, very easily. When we moved from New Zealand to China, we didn't have that sort of easy technology that I felt comfortable with her using. So she has lost all of those friendships from her years in New Zealand, which is hard for children. We've also had very sad challenges. My daughter has had experienced, some racism here, as I mentioned to you prior, and that was extremely hard to get my head around. I felt a huge, very complex mix of emotions, sadness and disbelief and anger that she was having to face such challenges that no child should have to face, particularly when my own child, was having to deal with it at the school that I was in leadership at. It was very, very difficult.
Wow, yeah. I mean, thank you for sharing that. I mean, I can only imagine how difficult that must be, particularly the sort of add-on of you being in the school and in the leadership team. I mean, that's incredibly hard.
It really was.
What would be the sort of one thing you wish schools understood about supporting third culture kids? Advice you'd like to see that schools will be putting in place?
Yes, third culture kids. It's something that I only heard about a year or two ago, which is funny. But The one thing that I do wish schools truly understood about these kids is how deeply important it is to recognise that these children are coming from maybe a multiple of different backgrounds. They have different languages, different identities and experiences, and schools need to recognise how valuable that is. Um, and for our children to they might not fit back into their place back in their first culture as easily as the other children are, and schools need to understand that, and they need to value these children's experiences. They need to hear them. These children need to be seen and valued for what they are bringing then in terms of richness to their school. I think now back teaching in New Zealand, and now after my experience of teaching all these years in China and my years in Papua New Guinea, I am a much better teacher because I recognise how important our different cultures are and how rich they make our lives. And I do think, it's made me much more understanding and so much more patience than I used to have. So I hope that schools do embrace these third culture kids, because they need to be celebrated, not just tolerated.
I like that. Celebrated, not just tolerated. Absolutely. What would you want other international teaching families to know about supporting their partner who didn't sign the contract?
Even if they didn't sign the contract, they are an equal partner in all of these decisions. This whole journey is not just about the teacher, it's about the partner, their hopes, their plans, their expectations, why they are going, why they are trailing. But emotionally, you also have to acknowledge that it's really difficult, but for your partner, for your husband, your spouse, to feel some loss and frustration, and having that open communication is really important. And it's something that I wasn't very good at the start. All I could see at the very start was how exciting my life was now. I had to really improve my communication and my patience, my understanding around all of those things. And just because his job was now different, it didn't make it any less important than my role was in the family. So recognizing that it is an equal partnership. So it's not just that practical sense, but it's the emotional sense. And I think if I had thought more about it right at the start, I would have been a lot better with that open communication. We were very naive going into it.
I think a lot of people would probably relate to that, or certainly resonate with what you're saying. You mentioned obviously racism experience, which is obviously terrible. Do you think all those sort of experiences, positive and negative, do you look back, if you reflect, that it is worth it, and why?
Absolutely. Look, if I was going to sum up one thing about our whole journey, so all of my international experiences, it would definitely be about just that incredible power of adaptability and togetherness. Every time I have moved, it's because I wanted my children to experience something different, a different culture, like you were saying, a different way of life. But I have found the positives have far outweighed the negatives, and it's been a wonderful opportunity for our family to grow together as a family. And obviously, we're a blended family, with being remarried and having a child from a previous, relationship. So yes, there has been difficulties, there has been challenges. I definitely agree with all of that. But the positives outweigh the negatives 1,000 to 1. I have grown as an educator, and I've been teaching obviously 30 years. So I'm not a young or new teacher. It's been absolutely amazing for us as a family, and it's made me realize that home, honestly, it's not a place, but it is the people that you share it with.
Brilliant. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Joshua.